The Toronto Blue Jays made some moves, some roster moves ahead of their last 5 games of the regular season. So hopefully those guys can get going and help the team out in the stretch run here. And maybe, just maybe, they can crack the playoff roster. So we'll break that down on this episode of Jays Digest, as well as the wild card schedule. It has been revealed, so start planning your days around Blue Jays baseball because it's coming. So stay tuned for what's coming up next. What's up, Jays fans? I'm your host, Peter Vryonis, alongside host Nick Gosse. Tough loss yesterday against the Yankees, but ultimately it shouldn't really matter. The Blue Jays are a 3. Their magic number is still 3. They got to win 3 games or get some help from other teams. As it stands right now, they have a 95.9% chance of making the playoffs, and the wild card schedule has been revealed. The times are not quite sure. We're not quite sure of that yet, but it's looking like the Blue Jays are going to finish in wild card 2, even though they're just a game and a half up now of the Houston Astros for that final wild card spot there. So it's interesting. It's going to be an interesting, intriguing storyline down the stretch of the season here, Nick, with 5 games left to go. But the Jays pretty much have everything set in stone. They just got to win a couple more games here, and they give themselves a great chance to make the playoffs. 89 wins, and you're pretty much assured of a playoff spot as well. 90 is just the guarantee. But yeah, they're in a good spot right now. Yesterday was a tough loss, but get back on the train today and go out there and get a win.
Yeah, and they made some moves. Honestly, a pretty big move when you're looking at it from the big scale of things going forward. Before we get to that, make sure to subscribe button. We're now at 8,300. We're on the road to 85, so that would be a lot if you could do that. Now, the Jays make a pretty big move, not big in the sense of who knows what kind of impact it'll have going forward, but it was of course the Brandon Belt move that came out of nowhere a little bit. We hadn't heard any updates about him over the past few days, and then boom, just yesterday they made a few subsequent moves. So Brandon Belt was reinstated yesterday and started the game. Jay Jackson was recalled from AAA, and Spencer Horwitz was sent down, and Nate Pearson was optioned to the Florida Complex League. So essentially they swapped Nate Pearson for Jay Jackson and replaced Brandon Belt with Spencer Horwitz. So a pretty clean kind of swap there. Honestly, the more surprising thing was that they sent Nate Pearson down just a couple days or about a week after Nate Pearson was, called up. And I'm sure Nate Pearson isn't too happy about that because he was on a pregame show or like a few games ago when he first got called up, and he was excited to help them down the stretch. But Peter, Brandon Belt is back. He didn't look great yesterday. And we've seen in the past that when Brandon Belt isn't really himself and coming off an injury, it usually takes a while for him to get back into the swing of things. So this is going to make the decision very, very tough for the Blue Jays, deciding their playoff roster, which is going to be something that, assuming they make the playoffs, I'm not taking that for granted yet. Like you said, a 96 or 97% chance after yesterday's loss, but pretty big move for the Blue Jays. And this was one that we needed at the very least just to see what he could do, because he was our second best hitter throughout most of the season.
Yeah, I still think he's going to make the postseason roster. He may not start the 2 games or the 3 games that the Jays play in the wild card series there, just because his timing isn't down. But look at what he did yesterday. He couldn't catch up to the fastball, but he still got up to a couple of 3-ball counts.
Yep.
He still got on base with the walk, so he was effective in that sense, and 5 more games should be enough time to get his footing under him, and should be enough time to get his timing down as well. So I think he'll be starting in wild card game 1. I think he'll be the DH. I think Kevin Biggio is going to be at second base, and Vlad is going to be at first base. It's a pretty easy solution. Takes care of a lot of issues, a lot of questions that the Jays may have had down the stretch here, but Brandon Belt, even at 75%, is better than a lot of options currently on the team. I mean, Davis Schneider is not really getting too lucky out there in the batter's box. Whit Merrifield hasn't really been the same hitter since a month now. So Kevin Biggio is going to be a mainstay. Vladdy is going to be a mainstay. And I hope Brandon Belt is going to be a mainstay as well, because even if he's not fully, his timing isn't fully down, I mean, just his eye is a valuable contribution to that Blue Jays lineup. So I'd like to have him out there. 5 games, I think he'll get his timing down, and hopefully he can start to get a couple of knocks and see the ball a bit better.
Yeah, we saw in yesterday's game, like you said, the offense was completely quiet. We only really had one good opportunity to score, and that was with the bases loaded, and Vladdy took 5, 6 straight pitches. But like you said, Brandon Belt, he did draw a walk yesterday. He got a full count off Michael King, and Michael King was untouchable throughout the whole game. And Brandon Belt was one of the guys who put up very, very good at bats alongside a couple other guys, Dalton Varsho and players like that. But like you said, having him in the lineup, not only does it, his eye is phenomenal and things like that, but he's a power threat to a degree. He's an extra base threat, and he's a guy that, even if he's in the 6 or 7 spot, I don't think he's in a bad cleanup in a wild card game. But having him at the bottom of the order is a kind of a power lefty bat, even though the power hasn't, been there too much this year. And one other thing to look at is Jay Jackson. This won't have playoff implications, we don't think, because obviously the pitchers, are limited bringing him in. But Jay Jackson is a guy who, Peter, we discussed this off camera. He's been very, very solid the whole season. He had one really bad outing, and other than that, he's been pretty much rock solid. And he's a guy that hopefully the Jays are playing for the next 5 games in the regular season, and that's what they're focused on right now. They're not focused on necessarily the playoff roster. Obviously, earlier we clinched, earlier we can line up, everything like that, but they're trying to win games right now, and they think that Jay Jackson gave him a better chance over Nate Pearson. So any quick thoughts on that before we move on to the playoff schedule?
Yeah, well, he's going to be a free agent at the end of the season anyways, so they can afford to use his last option and release him if he's just not cutting it. But when I look at the potential postseason roster, and I will fast forward here, you're going to have one of your 5 starters be in the bullpen, and that figures to be Yusei
Yep.
Kikuchi as it stands right now. He's been probably the least sharp of the 5. So he's going to be that long relief guy. So you really have no use for Bowden Francis. You have no use for slipping my mind now. But anyways, you don't have a use for another long guy in the bullpen because Yusei Kikuchi is probably going to be that guy. So yeah, you have all those options there to go out there and eat some innings for you. Jay Jackson, I trust him a little bit more in those higher leverage situations than I do Bowden Francis. I think Bowden Francis is going to be a good arm, but when it comes to playoff baseball, I'd rather have Jay Jackson out there for the 4th or the 5th inning if a starter can't make it past that point. So yeah, it makes sense. It's a move thinking ahead here, but yeah, if he doesn't pitch well down the stretch here in these next 5 games, then I wouldn't be shocked if they just release him because there's no loss in that sense. I mean, you were going to lose him at the end of the year anyways, or he was going to become a free agent. So it's no harm done there for the Blue Jays.
Yeah, and there's the reason that Jay Jackson is becoming a free agent, if you're unaware, there's some weird thing in his contract that allows him to, elect free agency at his age. So there's also a case that we made that maybe Hyunjin Ryu doesn't make the playoff roster. I know a few people on Twitter were discussing that, a few of the Jays reporters, simply because I think the 3 starters are pretty set in stone with Barrios, Bassett, and Gosman. Unsure about the order for this 2 and 3, but if you have Kikuchi in the bullpen, then you might be better off taking a bullpen arm or more of a traditional bullpen arm than Hyunjin Ryu. But that's something we'll discuss closer to the playoffs. And speaking of the playoff schedule has been revealed. Like you said, the times aren't revealed. However, circulating around Twitter, you can kind of make a guess, make an inference based on what has happened in previous years. So here are the Raw Card series. Feel free to pause and put it in your calendar, mark down your schedules. Now, Peter, on Tuesday, I'm not going to read all these out. We're going to be playing Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. The times are not revealed yet. However, if you go off previous years, especially if we're playing against Tampa Bay, according to what people are saying online, Tampa Bay is usually first pitch is around 2:30 Eastern or 4 or 4:30 Eastern. It'll be one of those times most likely. The Jays usually don't get that night slot, so you can suspect some kind of afternoon to early evening game. It could be wrong, but that seems to be the consensus, and that's what it was like in 2020. That's what it was like last year as well. I believe last year was the 4:07 p.m. Eastern start time. So you can kind of start to plan your days around it. It's only a week away, which is kind of crazy because we're still in the battle for the playoff spot, although we are most likely a given to make it. But plan your days around this. If you have work, call in sick, do whatever you have to do, or take class, skip class. But I'm not condoning that, but it is what it is. And Peter, what are your thoughts on this? I know you probably have work
we might
for
have
it.
to go ahead and do that. We might have to go ahead and find a way to watch this game kind of illegally in a sense. But there's nothing scarier than a daytime game at the Trop. I'll just leave it at that. I don't want that to happen. Honestly, I hope the Jays lose the next couple games and get that wild card 3 so we can avoid Tampa Bay and Baltimore if we do make it past Tampa Bay altogether. Just because that seems like a gauntlet and that seems like an absolute hell of playoff matchup. So, look, I'll take any matchup that we can get. I'll take any kind of playoff baseball that we can get at this point. Let's hope the Jays can go on a lengthy run here. Let's hope that they can find find their bats again tonight because they went cold yesterday. It's going to be tough against Garrett Cole, but this is going to be a great test for them because they're going to see some great pitching in however many games they play in the playoffs. And one more note there on the playoff roster. That's a good point that you make for the wild card round, Nick. They
Yep.
only need three starters,
Yeah.
so they're gonna have a fourth starter that is in the pen and probably an extra pen arm. So yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if Hyunjin Ryu is not one of the four starters selected because Yusei Kikuchi's stuff plays a lot better in the bullpen anyway. So yeah, he should be back for the divisional series if they go ahead and make it there. But yeah, I'm not holding my breath for him making the wild card series roster.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it, and it's going to be exciting going forward. But that'll wrap up the video. Hopefully, the Jays can show some more life tonight. They've been playing great over the past, really couple weeks and all of September. So if they can maybe get, this is probably the biggest game in a while. So maybe we can get some big, push and offense against Garrett Cole. It would be nice going into the playoffs. But thank you guys for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.